Do you need some practical tips on how to discipline your children? Well, that's what we're going to talk about in this video, so stay tuned. Hey, what's up? My name's Hal. Thanks so much for tuning into this video today. If you like what you see and you get something out of it, make sure you hit the subscribe button, share it with some friends. Also, be sure to visit my website, halchafee.com, for more information on this topic. How should you spank your kids? If you haven't done it yet, make sure you go back and view my previous video on this subject called Should I Spank My Kids? Because really it talks about the why behind spankings, and that's very important to understand when you go to spank your children, why you're doing it. This video is going to be some more practical advice on how to spank your kids, so we're going to jump right into it. So I want to share a scripture with you first. This is Proverbs chapter 23, verses 13 and 14. It says, "Do not withhold correction from a child." When the Bible here uses the word correction, it is talking about physical, corporal punishment. And we know that by looking at the very next phrase where it says, "For if you beat him with a rod, he shall not die. You shall beat him with a rod and deliver his soul from hell." Now, when the Bible says beat with a rod, it doesn't mean beating the crap out of your kid. It is simply referring to spankings. As a matter of fact, the actual Hebrew word isn't the word beat, and beat implies like a continuous beating. It just means to smite or to hit. So it's talking about physical punishment, corporal punishment. It's talking about spankings. And we're going to talk about what that really looks like. So if you're angry that I mentioned that, make sure you stick around for the rest of this video so we can talk about what that looks like practically. And then it says, "You shall beat him with the rod and deliver his soul from hell." Now this probably isn't speaking about spiritual things. It's probably not speaking about the afterlife. In the Bible, and specifically the Old Testament, the word hell is the Hebrew word Sheol, and it just simply means the grave, or it means death. And so what the author is saying here, he's saying, listen, if you don't spank your kid, you're setting your kid up for a destructive lifestyle. You're setting your kid up to make bad decisions. And so as you as a parent, by spanking your kids, by training them properly and spanking them properly, you are helping them to avoid a destructive lifestyle that brings death. Okay? Now, death would be the ultimate thing. But when I say death, I just mean things that tend towards death, like destructive behaviors, like addictions, different things like that. So we want our children to avoid that, and one of the ways that we can help them avoid that is by disciplining them in the proper way, which includes spanking. So here's some practical tips when it comes to spanking your kids. Number one, spank out of love, not out of anger. Now, a lot of times when I hear people talk who are against spanking, they'll say things like this: "I understand why people spank their kids, because when I get angry at my kids, I want to spank them too." Now, these people don't have any idea on how you should spank your kids. You should never spank your kids out of anger. Very rarely do I get angry at my kids. I understand that they're kids and they're going to make mistakes. And not only are they going to make mistakes, but they're going to just do things that they shouldn't do because they are kids. And sometimes, yes, I'm going to get angry, but I'm not going to spank out of anger. If I am angry, I'm going to stop and move away from the situation and calm down, because when you do things when you're angry, you do things that you regret. So make sure that when you are spanking your kids, you're in complete control over your emotions, you're in complete control over your anger, and if you're not in that state, make sure you can get in that state before you begin to implement discipline. Number two, don't spank your kids for making mistakes. That drives me crazy when parents spank their kids for making a mistake. Listen, you want your kids to make as many mistakes as possible, because that means they're trying new things, they're stepping out, they're taking risks, and you want your child to do that, especially in the safety of your care. You want to watch your child explore the world, make mistakes, and grow as a person. And the only way they can do that is if they feel safe making mistakes. Now, that doesn't mean go out and do dumb things, but it just means that they need to have the freedom to feel like they're safe inside of your care as a parent. So if your child does something and it's an honest mistake, please do not spank them. Now, you can sit down and talk to them and say, listen, I think you're probably aware that what you did was wrong. that's something that shouldn't be done. And you can talk about the whys of it shouldn't be done and say, I'm not going to punish you because you didn't know any better, but next time I expect you to know better and act differently. And you don't have to have like a real tight regiment when it comes to this. Like, well, if you do it one more time, I'm going to spank you. Just kind of use your judgment. And if you feel like they're doing it just out of willful disobedience, then they probably need a spanking. So don't spank your children for making mistakes. Spank them for willful disobedience. There's a huge difference there. The difference is, some parents, their child will be taking their plate to put it in the sink, and they'll drop it on the floor and break it, and they'll give them a spanking for that. Please, no. If you care that much about your plates, use plastic plates, okay? Don't spank your kids for that. But if you say to your kids, hey, go clean your room, and they look at you and say, no, I'm not going to clean my room, that's willful disobedience, and that's when spankings are called for. So I think that you as a parent will know the difference between willful disobedience and making mistakes. And if you're unsure, then always err on the side of caution. If your child does something and you're not sure if they knew better or not, for that instance, you say, listen, I don't know if you knew better or not, but I expect next time that you make the right choice in this regard. So don't spank your kids for making mistakes. Spank them for willful disobedience. Number 3, don't use empty threats. This drives me crazy. If you tell your kid that you're going to spank them, you need to spank them. Otherwise, you're going to have zero credibility in the eyes of your children. And I see families all the time where the mom or the dad yell this and that, and the kids just ignore them because they know that their parents don't really mean what they say. And it's kind of unfair because sometimes the parents will carry through with a threat and sometimes they won't, and the kids just never know when the parent really means what they say. No, listen, say what you mean and mean what you say. I don't tell my kids I'm going to spank them unless I'm really seriously going to spank them. And so I don't tell them I'm going to spank them really very often. But if it comes down to the point where they're not listening and they're not doing what they're told or they're being willfully disobedient, then I'm going to say, listen, you're going to get a spanking if you don't shape up real quick. Or you're getting a spanking. And then you know what? If they don't follow through, if they cross that line, if I count to 3 and if I get to 3, I'm going to give them a spanking. I'm going to cause them to understand that when I say something, I'm not just throwing words out there, that I mean what I say. And when your children learn that you mean what you say, they're going to understand that they need to listen to you. And so when you're in the grocery store and you say, listen, if you keep this up, when we get home, you're getting a spanking. When they realize that you really mean that, you're going to have less episodes at the grocery store. So don't use empty threats. Number 4, when you spank a child, make sure that it hurts. Now, please don't get mad at me, but this is vitally important. What I don't mean is you got to beat the tar out of your kid. That's not what I mean. What I do mean is it does need to cause pain relative to that child's size and age. For a very small child, like a 2-year-old, it may just need to slap them on the hand or something if they're reaching for the electrical outlet, and that'll hurt them enough. Or maybe just a small swat with the wooden spoon like that on their leg or something like that. But it's got to sting. If it doesn't sting, the whole point of spanking goes out the window. And you need to go back and look at my previous video on why should I spank my kids. Or should I spank my kids? And you'll see the reason why it's got to hurt. Now, I remember when I was a kid, my mom would spank me, and it didn't hurt. And I would just pretend to cry because I didn't want her to do something worse. And so spankings didn't work for me because they didn't hurt. But when they hurt, they will work. What that means is when you go to spank your child, if your child is maybe 3 or 4 or 5 or something like that, you take something like a wooden spoon, and I always recommend using a wooden spoon or a small dowel rod or something like that, because when you spank with a wooden spoon or with a rod, the rod becomes the bad guy and not daddy's hand. Daddy's hand is for loving and for hugs and for high fives and stuff like that, but this guy's the bad guy. So my kids know that if I come to them, and anytime I come to them without this, that nothing's going to cause them pain. But they also know when I pick this up, daddy means business, because this is Mr. Ouchie Pants, you know what I'm saying? And so make sure it stings. And with like a 3 or 4 or 5-year-old, you may need it just one time on the buttocks. And that's it. Maybe twice, maybe 3 times. The most I've ever done with my child is 3 whacks with a wooden spoon. And it kind of looks like this. That hurt. Did I leave a mark? No. But it was plenty enough to get a child's attention, and plenty enough to get your point across that willful disobedience is not okay. So that's some practical tips on how to spank your kids. Number 1, do it out of love, not anger. Number 2, don't spank your child for making mistakes. Spank them from willful disobedience. Number 3, don't use empty threats. Mean what you say and say what you mean. And number 4, make sure that it hurts. Well, I hope you got something out of this video. If you have any questions, because I really kind of rushed through some of this stuff because I wanted to keep this video short, please leave them in the comments section below. And if you have any suggestions for any future videos regarding this subject, I'd be glad to do some more videos to help explain some things. So put that in the comment section below as well. Thank you so much for watching, and God bless you.